Hello, I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute for the Humanities and Alternative College and High School here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. This is the Saturday, January 24th edition of News with the Fetz. Here I am in Connecticut. Dr. Fetzer, welcome and tell us how cold it is in your neck of the woods, and you have the stage, sir.
With the wind chill, John, it's minus 40 here in Wisconsin, which is frankly absurd. Even in Duluth, I can't remember it getting lower than minus 35. So this is really quite stunning.
Excellent. And should I bring up the slides here, Dr. Fetzer?
Please do so, John, yes. We begin with outrage in Denmark, incensed by Trump push for Greenland. Make America go away. We used to be honored by the world, revered, regarded as a big brother. Now they want us to go away, John. How bad is that? Denmark, Copenhagen, on a cold, foggy afternoon in downtown Copenhagen. Military veteran Flemming Ullman joined thousands of fellow Danes in what he said was the first protest he's ever participated in to oppose a Trump admin push to acquire Greenland. I've actually never done this before, demonstrating, but this is very important to me, said Ullman, 57, with NBC. He said he'd been following developments and felt, I need to do something. He estimated 10,000 Danes gathered in the City Hall Square Saturday afternoon to express their frustration with Trump's rhetoric. The crowd included parents with small children as well as older Danes wearing hats in the style of Trump MAGA, but scrawled with "Make America Go Away," MAGA. Notice the same letters but different meaning, and wave Greenlandic flags and signs saying "Hands off Greenland." We have to support Greenland, said protester Suzanne Christensen. We are Danes. Greenland's Danes, even though they're Greenlanders, and we just have to stick together. Some protesters expressed fear that if they spoke out about Trump in the press or on social media, his admin could bar them from visiting the U.S. during his term in office. I won't go there until he's out, Christensen reported. Meanwhile, Trump himself is reporting the Greenland deal has been worked out, at least a framework with the head of NATO. President Trump said Wednesday a framework for a Greenland deal is in place after talks with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in Davos, Switzerland. John, I understand the proposal is to buy Greenland for $700 billion and give $100,000 to each of the 57,000 residents thereof. That is what I understand to be the proposal. Trump announced the move in his Truth Social, where he also rescinded tariffs scheduled to take effect on selected European countries on February 1st. We have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. This solution, if consummated, will be a great one for the United States of America and for all NATO nations. Based upon this understanding, I will not be imposing tariffs scheduled to go into effect on February 1st. Additional discussions are being held concerning the Golden Dome as it pertains to Greenland. And John, as you know, the Golden Dome is supposed to be a ballistic missile defense for the entire continental United States. Given the inability of even the Iron Dome to protect Israel, which is the size of New Jersey, from Iranian missiles, I think the Golden Dome is one more fantasy that may come at fabulous expense. Earlier Wednesday, during remarks to the World Economic Forum, Trump assured he did not want to use force. I won't use force, Trump said, but He added the United States will not forget the slight if a deal on Greenland is not reached. So we want a piece of ice for world protection and they won't give it. We've never asked for anything else. We could have kept that piece of land, implying some fantasy of prior American ownership, and we didn't. So you have a choice. You can say yes, and we'll be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember. John, your thoughts?
Oh, my thoughts are the same with the entire Trump saga, of which I must confess still that I'm holding out some warmth for still, at least nostalgically. But my comments on this point and to this administration and the original one, I wish the neocons would just go away. I had it was a Christmas morning for a hot second from very nakedly from the time of George W. Bush, but obviously before him to Clinton and Bush 1 and Reagan, there were these people we call neocons that were there all along. And then for a hot second, like I say, it was Christmas morning. These people, these neocons, it seemed for a moment were gone. They were there all along. They were there all along, obviously, in Trump's administration, if one sobers up. They were there. It seemed no one could have more a run of the roost than during the Biden administration. And here they are again, at least for this chapter with Greenland, at least now they're not with the army like they are in Venezuela, Iraq, Syria, all their other experiments. I just wish the neocon stuff would go away. I wish Trump would be conservative. I wish Americans would remember Washington's farewell address and keep our business to ourselves. But anyway, those are my thoughts here, and we'll see what comes of this, Dr. Fetzer.
Much appreciated, John. His remark came ahead of his conversation during which the framework was reached. Trump said alleged talks are underway regarding Greenland and his proposed Golden Dome defense system to shield the U.S. from long-range threats, adding, more details will be released as discussions continue. Further information will be made available as discussion progresses. Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, various others as needed will be responsible for the negotiations and will report directly to me. Trump last weekend had threatened to impose new 10% tariffs on Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Germany, France, United Kingdom, Netherlands, and Finland on February 1st over their opposition to U.S. control of Greenland. The move would have been added to an existing 15% tariff outlined in an EU trade agreement that has not yet been ratified. Meanwhile, U.S. Special Envoy for Peace Mission Steve Witkoff speaks with CNBC's Sarah Eisen in Davos about developments with relation to Palestine and the like. This is an unofficial transcript. Sarah, I'm here with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who's in the middle of negotiating many peace discussions, and he's here in Davos ahead of the president's arrival. Steve, great to see you, Steve. Nice to see you too, Sarah. Thank you. Eisen. And we have a chance to get an update on some of what you're working on. So first, the Board of Peace. How's this going? Witkoff, I think it's going great. We have tremendous response from world leaders. I think we have north of 20, maybe 25 world leaders have already accepted. And by the way, the entrance fee for the Board of Peace is $1 billion. $1 billion with a B. That's not small potatoes. He continues, and I think the president will give a very significant speech with regard, and we're all excited. The president single-handedly, settled 8 wars. I don't think so. And it's important to him we settle all the conflicts out there. And the Board of Peace is an integral part of that. So what is it exactly? Some people say it's a UN alternative. No, it's just a great group of leaders coming together with great opinions and sharing opinions to achieve peace. And that's what we need. Sometimes I say that my title should be Secretary of Miscommunication. And the president's doing that. He's cleaning up miscommunication out there. He's bringing people together so we can solve conflict. What do you mean? What are you referring to specifically? Woodcock. Russia, Ukraine, Iran, things happening in the Sudan, just so many things. The upsurge in Syria. A lot of things are just about miscommunication and bridging relationships. And that's where you come in. I mean, you've been involved in a number of discussions now with President Putin. Is there progress? Well, that's true, but it is President Trump. I'm an emissary of his. I really am. Nothing would be possible without his, what I call his indomitable personality. And so what is the current status of the Russian negotiation? Well, you've heard the Ukrainians. They said that we're making more progress than they've seen in the last several years. We're making that progress since Geneva. So lots of progress in the last 6 or 8 weeks. We'll be meeting them this evening. I believe we'll be seeing the Russians. Jared and I sometime on Thursday evening, and I think we're bringing everyone closer. Ukrainians were our guests in Miami this past weekend, and we think we're making a lot of progress. Hopefully, we'll have something good to announce soon. Isaac, do you have a sort of framework or contours of what a deal would look like here? Well, it's our 20-point plan, and we're massaging and harmonizing. I think we're down to land deals. That's been the 800-pound elephant in the room, because remember, Russia does not want to give up any of the territory it's taken in the Donbass, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kursk. They're not going to give those up. They also, of course, want there to be a guarantee NATO is not taking in Ukraine, and demilitarization, and perhaps the hardest to achieve, denazification. Putin has been absolutely consistent about this from the beginning, and he's not going to change. Witkov. I think we have some very, very good ideas, and hopefully we'll be able to make some progress. President Putin, you think we'll get there? Witkov, I do. Why? Witkov, I do. I know what gives you that confidence. Well, look, we have to go meet him on Thursday. That would have been yesterday. But the Russians who are asking for that, I think it's a significant statement on their part. I think I just sense everybody wants peace there, that it's time. Eisen, is he joining the Board of Peace with God? I think so, yeah. What Putin said was, sure, and you can take that billion out of the frozen Russian assets the United States has improperly seized. Eisen, is President Macron? I think an invitation has been sent out to President Putin by President Trump. What about President Macron? There was some drama around that. I hope so. I like President Macron. So I hope he joins. I think he'd be very helpful and very useful. Eisen. And is there set to be a signing on Thursday, as the president announced here in Davos? Yeah. Witkov said there'll be some ceremonial events, and you'll hear much about it. The president, I believe, is making 2 speeches, one on affordability, the other on the Board of Peace. So I think over the next 24 hours, there'll be a lot of discussion and conversation. Eisen. And is Israel fully on board? I know there was some consternation around who's involved in the Board of Peace. For instance, the Turkish president, Erdogan, who has called for the end of the Zionist state. Is it appropriate for him to be on the board, figuring out what happens with Gaza? Well, I talked to the prime minister the other day. He was a great guy for a mass murderer, for a monster, for one of the greatest evil figures in the history of humanity. Is a great guy, cares about his country, great patriot, and he is exuberant about joining the Board of Peace. We shall see. He knows it's an important endeavor on the president's part, and PM Netanyahu has been a great partner of our country, and President Trump says that all the time. So I think he feels really good about it. But look at this. Israel opposes Trump's advancing Gaza peace plan. Trump is planning to sell seats on the Gaza Board of Peace for $1 billion. Prime Minister Netanyahu, and this was just a few days ago on the 18th, said the White House Executive Committee to run Gaza is problematic for Israel. Here is a message, a tweet from the Prime Minister's office. The announcement regarding the composition of the Gaza Executive Board, which is subordinate to the Board of Peace, was not coordinated with Israel and runs contrary to its policy. Tel Aviv did not provide details on its issues with Trump's Gaza Board. A source told Haaretz that the public rebuke was for show, and Netanyahu is aware of the planning for the executive committee. Netanyahu's public statement, however, drew a sharp rebuke from Washington. This is our show, not his show. We managed to do things in Gaza in recent months nobody thought was possible, and we are going to continue moving, a U.S. official told Axios in response to the Israeli PM statement. If he wants us to deal with Gaza, it'll have to be our way. We worked over him. Let him focus on Iran and let us deal with Gaza. We're not going to argue with him. He will do his politics, and we will keep moving forward with our plan. He can't really go against us. Friday last, the White House announced Trump was a chair of the executive committee, including Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, former British PM Tony Blair, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. John, your thoughts?
Thank you, Dr. Fetzer. Well, one of which is, I guess it's pretty obvious who owns whom here in the regards towards Davos. Something that struck me this week is, I guess, in diplomacy and in the ways of the world and in history, the subordinate goes to the superior. And it's very interesting in a very big general picture as regards Davos that you have the titular leaders of these liberal nation states going to the bankers. They're going to Switzerland. They're going to Davos, which is sealed off, and you know all the security over there. But the point is, it's these so-called world leaders going to the bankers. So that's one thing that strikes me in the meta about this. And then in particular, I mean, I just want to second your conclusions about Prime Minister Netanyahu and I guess words don't matter anymore. So the Board of Peace has this monster on it. We can use all the adjectives. We know who this individual is. And then as regards the Zionists, once again in this series, well, I guess we see who owns whom. And it is so blatant here. I mean, they're just saying it in their publications here. And, with gnats, with nobodies, with non-entities politically in America, the so-called MAGA movement will stomp them out and will thump its chest. But when it comes to real power dynamics, you can run your mouth. These Zionists, they can run their mouth about who owns who and who gets to slap who around. And the MAGA people and Trump won't do a thing about it. So I guess we have a hierarchy. We see the hierarchy in the light of day here. Those are my thoughts, Dr. Fetzer.
I don't think there's a chance that Netanyahu is going to join the Board of Peace. He doesn't want there to be a cessation of hostilities. He wants all the Palestinians dead, or at least out of the lands of Palestine, so they can steal them.
Well,
Complete.
yes, of course, but excuse me, but my understanding is though that he has been invited on this. No.
Yeah, but I'm saying he's not going to do it.
Oh, okay, I see. Yes, yes.
Yeah. I mean, Witkoff is being very positive, but I think that's coaxing. I think that's politics, diplomacy. But notice there's no representative of the Palestinian people or of Hamas on the board of peace. It's like having a negotiation, a ceasefire, not bringing both sides together, only one side. It ain't going to work. Yep, here's one more.
To interject, Dr. Fetzer,
Go ahead.
I did have a question from last week, and it's appropriate here as well, just to pick your mind. Comparing the last Trump administration to this one, and we can see it in Witkoff's statements here. This is very appropriate, and it's a good time to bring this up. In the first Trump administration, to my reading, it was full of cutthroats like Pompeo and Mark Esper and John Bolton, and just careerist Kushner's in both, of course, God help us. But the first administration, it was total careerist, cutthroats, no loyalty whatsoever. In this administration of President Trump, it is, as I see it, suck-ups and nobodies and salamanders. They have no spine. Mark Rubio and just bootlickers, to be polite. Do you have a thought on the matter? Do you see that perception? Do you agree with it? And do you have a thought which is worse? I don't know which is worse. Do you have cutthroats is worse or suck-ups are worse? I think either are bad for advisors.
Well, it's an Israeli foreign policy both ways, John, but I think it's perceptive of you to make those observations that the neocons, the most blatant and outspoken, were prominent in the first Trump admin, and now they've been suppressed by loyalists. I think Trump made it his rule for appointment that they had to display unqualified loyalty to Donald Trump. And look how Witkoff goes out of his way. Every other word is a praise for Trump, praise for Trump. And so the man has a very fragile ego and is going to immediately respond with resentment if you don't tout his role here. And I think actually that's pretty close to the mark, that the man is a narcissist. I mean, renaming the Kennedy Center, the Trump and the Kennedy Center, I mean, how outrageous. Having the gigantic ballroom, I'm very troubled by that. Believing he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, frankly, it's a fantasy. He hasn't actually solved, so far as I can tell, any war, not even one, much less the preposterous claims to have solved 8. So we're in an odd situation here with a guy who I think is actually in the process of losing it. I think he's suffering from dementia, John. I actually do. So here we have more. The executive committee carried out the directives of the Board of Peace led by President Donald Trump. The president invites some world leaders to join the board, selling seats for $1 billion. With the creation of the executive committee, the White House claimed Trump's Gaza peace deal had advanced to phase 2. However, Hamas also objects to the executive committee. The Palestinian group points out that Tel Aviv has failed to uphold several of its commitments in phase 1, including opening the Rafah crossing and allowing temporary housing into Gaza. Tel Aviv claims Hamas is violating the agreement by not returning the body of an Israeli captive. But this is one whose, I think, body was so decomposed they couldn't even identify. I mean, this is an exaggerated and unreasonable position by Israel. But of course, so far, the Palestinian group had released 20 living hostages and bodies of 27 to 28 deceased. And he has stated, however, he will not allow the Rafah crossing to open until the remains of the final Israeli is returned. Meanwhile, here we have Jeffrey Sachs and Sybil Farhes. Every nation in the world should reject Trump's absurd and dangerous Board of Peace. The so-called Board of Peace being created by President Trump is profoundly degrading to the pursuit of peace and to any nation that would lend it legitimacy. This is a Trojan horse to dismantle the United Nations. It should be refused outright by every nation invited to join. In its charter, the Board of Peace, BOP, claims to be, quote, an international organization that seeks to promote stability, restore dependability and lawful governance, and serve enduring peace, secure enduring peace in areas affected or threatened by conflict, end quote. If that sounds familiar, it should, because it's the mandate for the United Nations. Created in the aftermath of World War II, the UN has as its central mission the maintenance of international peace and security. Hence that question to Witkoff by Sarah, is this a replacement or alternative to the UN? Oh, no, he said, but the facts appear to contradict his reply. It is no secret that Trump holds contempt for international law and the UN. He said so himself during his September 2025 speech at the General Assembly, and has recently withdrawn from 31 UN entities. Following a long tradition of U.S. foreign policy, he's consistently violated international law, including the bombing of 7 countries in the past year, none of which were authorized by the Security Council, none of which was undertaken in lawful self-defense under the Charter. Those are the requirements and conditions. Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and Venezuela. He's now claiming Greenland with brazen and open hostility toward U.S. allies in Europe. So what about this Board of Peace? It is, to put it simply, I would say even kindly, a pledge of allegiance to Trump, who seeks the role of world chairman and the world's ultimate arbiter. The BOP will have as its executive board none other than Trump political donors, family members, and couriers. The leaders of nations that sign up will get to rub shoulders with and take orders from Marco Rubio, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and Tony Blair. Hedge fund owner and Republican Party mega donor Mark Rowland will also get to play. More to the point, any decision taken by the BOP will be subject to troops' approval or veto, may I add. If the charade of representatives isn't enough, nations will have to pay $1 billion for a permanent seat on the board. Any nation that participates should know what it's buying. It is certainly not buying peace or a solution for the Palestinian people, as the money supposedly goes to Gaza's reconstruction. It is buying ostensible access to Trump for as long as it serves his interest. It is buying an illusion of momentary influence in a system where Trump rules are enforced by personal whim. The proposal is absurd, not least because it purports to solve a problem that already has an 80-year-old global solution. The United Nations exists precisely to prevent a personalization of war and peace. It's designed, after the wreckage of 2 world wars, to global base peace on collective rules and international law. The UN's authority rightly derives from the UN Charter, ratified by 193 member states, including the U.S., as ratified by the Senate in July of 1945, and grounded in international law. If the U.S. doesn't want to abide by the Charter, the UN General Assembly should suspend the U.S. credentials, as it once did with apartheid South Africa. Trump's Board of Peace is a blatant repudiation of the UN. Trump has made that explicit, recently declaring that the Board of Peace might indeed replace the UN. This statement alone should end conversation for any serious national leader. Participation after such a declaration is a conscious decision to subordinate one's country to Trump personalized global authority. It is to accept in advance that peace is no longer governed by the UN Charter, but by Trump. Still, some nations desperate to get on the right side of the U.S. may take the bait. They should remember the wise words, the wisdom of John F. Kennedy in his inaugural address when he observed, "Those who foolishly sought power by riding the back of the tiger ended up inside."
Well, two of which I suppose are related here. One is whoever is advising President Trump, neocon or whatever the case may be, it seems they're gunning at this point. I mean, I watch a lot, as you do, and the audience as well, a lot of the mainstream international press. And, when these stories about conquering Greenland and Venezuela and they're not using this term yet, the technate and all of this jazz, when things are like this are nudging their way into the international press, it seems the people who are advising President Trump and his administration really are gunning for frankly, an empire. I mean, they're really, I don't know what history books they're reading or what's on their mind, but they truly seem to be going for, well, the gold, to use a color and a metal that comes up a lot as regards Trump. So that's one that strikes me. And certainly with this replacement or this competitor, we'll see, time will tell, of the UN with this board of peace, or perhaps some competitor with NATO or BRICS, time will tell. With this. The second point, I'm being a little bit playful here, but just playing off of the idea of an American empire that very soon, time will tell, the mask will be off. Now, this country, I don't believe, has been a republic since the Civil War, but we've at least been keeping up pretenses. The time may come shortly where we're just going to just openly admit, yes, this is an empire. And I'm just being playful here, but remember this for the audience and to the co-host here. In 2028, Trump will step down. We're just jagging here. We're spitballing. TPUSA a few weeks ago anointed Vice President Vance to be the executive candidate for 28. So it'll be Vance on the Republican ticket. Erica Kirk will run for vice president in 2028. If they win, President Vance will divorce Usha. We're talking about an American empire here, Dr. Fetzer. I'm just having fun here, but I'm not having fun. I'm just playing with the tea leaves here. In 28, Vance will win the presidency. He will divorce his wife, Usha. Erica Kirk will have been the vice president running. He will marry Erica Kirk, and this will be the beginning of a dynasty. By that point, America might be an empire officially, and this will be the ruling dynasty. This sounds insane, but if you've paid attention to the audience over the stories over the past few years, nothing's off the table. And that's a scenario I would suggest people just put in their back pocket there. So those are my 2 points as regards empire and replacing the UN and these sorts of things, Dr. Fetzer.
Well, John, that's a fascinating speculation now. It turns out that Erica is a woman with a sordid past. She appears to have been running a child trafficking operation out of Romania back when she was as young as 17. She's been called out for multiple misrepresentations. Some are calling them lies about Charlie Kirk and Turning Point. And frankly, I think she's already damaged goods. I do not see any possible way she can run as vice president on ticket with Vance. And I'm open to Vance, in whom I've never had any confidence, having his path to the White House eclipsed by a combination, say, of Tulsi Gabbard and Thomas Massey. And I won't be surprised if Marjorie Taylor Greene throws her hat into the ring. I think among those three, you're going to have an alternative ticket that's far more appealing to the American people. But I appreciate your speculations and suggestion of what could be in their minds. I grant that may very well have been the plan, but I'm suggesting it's not going to work out as intended, and the outcome is going to be very different indeed. Your thoughts?
That's very well said in regards to the fact that just because this system has plans or factions of the system have plans doesn't mean that it will come to pass. So that's quite interesting. You mentioned that Green's not down for the count, and that some of these true populists, however we describe them, will come back to the fore. That would be quite heartening. And perhaps perhaps the old MAGA dog isn't dead. Obviously, Trump has given up on MAGA, I'm afraid. But that movement, speaking for myself here, the MAGA movement and what that represented, and you have a much bigger footprint in time than I do, but I've been following this for a long time. The MAGA movement, not the leadership, certainly not Trump, but that movement represents a true Americana and a true grassroots, and to a certain extent, when it's sober, represents something beyond the left-right. It represents true democracy in the wholesomeness of that word. And yes, I should hope what you envision and what you suggest, I should say, will come to pass, that these people that have, for the moment, been marginalized, Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, will come to the fore. I should think of even maybe a half dozen other people from the GOP that have been shunted off to the side because they were too honest. They were too good of leaders, and the Republican machine got rid of them. So yes, I hope that comes to pass for certain. And just one thing to reprise, earlier, maybe even a year ago at this point, I had said something crazy. But as regards to Erica Kirk, I have a theory. I can't prove this, although I should want to research it, and there must be documentation if this is the correct conclusion, that a large percentage of babies that were aborted in these abortion clinics for 50 years were not in fact killed, but they were whisked away and raised up. Do you remember that, Dr. Fetzer? I had suggested that a while ago.
Yes, John.
Okay. If that is the case, in the scenario that I had suggested, that these people were raised up to be television anchors, mostly soldiers, police, and people that just appear from nowhere, Hollywood actors. Long story short, and this is my final answer to your question, because we brought up Erica Kirk. Erica Kirk would be the snapshot of this sort of person that seems to come from nowhere, is given a golden spoon, I don't know, but a CIA spoon in her mouth, starting, and I don't know what I was doing at 17. I think I was playing video games and chasing skirt and working at fast food restaurants when I was 17. But she was starting orphanages in Romania. This woman had the CIA spoon in her mouth. And this is exactly, if what I suggest is the case, about that there's a cadre of tens of millions of people that just exist to fill roles that were supposedly aborted, this would be the sort of that we see with the Erica Kirk character. So thank you for giving me the stage, Dr. Fetzer, on that.
Yeah, I think she's worn out her welcome, and people are seeing through her, and she has a very short self-life remaining. Meanwhile, perhaps you could assist me with reading this, as it's hard for me. Iran claims 10,000-kilometer ICBM test, strategic shockwaves as Tehran signals ability to strike the United States.
Iran's claim that it had successfully tested a ballistic missile with a range of 10,000 kilometers capability that would place the continental United States firmly within theoretical striking distance represents the most consequential alleged escalation in Tehran's strategic weapons posture since the inception of its ballistic missile program during the Iran-Iraq War. The assertion, disseminated through state-affiliated outlets, including a Tassim news agency, has been amplified by Iranian parliamentarians and senior regime-aligned figures, Most notably Moshen Zangana, a member of Iran's Majlis, who said publicly, quote, "The night before last, we tested one of the country's most advanced missiles, which until now had not, so to speak, been trialed. And that test was successful," unquote. Zangedev reinforced the gravity of the claim in a separate interview by reiterating, quote, 2 nights ago, we tested one of the country's most advanced missiles, which had not been tested so far, and it was successful," unquote. Language that Iranian analysts deliberately framed to signal intercontinental capability rather than incremental range extension. The rhetoric surrounding the alleged test has been carefully synchronized with messaging attributed to sources close to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, with Tasnim citing an unnamed defense official asserting, quote, "This test demonstrates Iran's unwavering commitment to self-reliance in defense technology," unquote, echoing Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's long-standing emphasis on strategic autonomy under sanctions. While no independent intelligence agency has yet confirmed a fully successful intercontinental ballistic missile flight profile as of January 19th, 2026, the convergence of satellite imagery from Imam Khomeini's spaceport, social media signaling, and Iranian parliamentary disclosures has forced Western and Asian defense planners to reassess long-held assumptions about Iran's ICBM timeline. From a strategic deterrence perspective, the functional 10,000-kilometer missile would transform Iran from a regional missile power into a nascent global strike actor, fundamentally altering threat calculations from Washington to Brussels and from Tel Aviv to Tokyo. The claim also arrives amid sustained internal unrest in Iran, ongoing proxy warfare across the Middle East, and deepening military-industrial cooperation between Tehran and Moscow, conditions that collectively heighten the credibility of accelerated weapons development under crisis pressure. As one Iranian official previously warned in a statement widely circulated among regional security circles, quote, "America is about 10,000 kilometers away from us, and we can bring our ships to within about 2,000 kilometers of it, and from there launch missiles that will hit Washington, New York, and other American cities," unquote. A declaration now being retrospectively framed as strategic foresight rather than rhetorical bravado. Whether Iran has achieved a genuine intercontinental breakthrough or is executing a calibrated deterrence by ambiguity strategy, the implications of this claim ripple across global missile defense architectures, non-proliferation regimes, and Indo-Pacific security dynamics.
Iran is not making claims that are untrue, and that Iran does now have a missile that can hit the United States. And in my opinion, that is, although the phrase is often overused and abused, a real game changer in the Middle East. And I think Trump is going to be extremely reluctant to attack Iran when Iraq can actually hit the United States. Just imagine bombing Iran and Iran retaliating by hitting Washington, D.C. So I think the situation has changed dramatically by means of this development, which I welcome. I think this is very timely, very appropriate, and it's going to make a real difference. Your thoughts?
Yes, and I think this builds off of last week's episode very well. Russia. We had mentioned Russia interjecting itself in the saber rattling last week. Things move so quickly, but the United States and Zion behind it, saber rattling against Iran. There were, as we just read, great upheavals, great infiltration of Mossad and other intelligence agencies stirring up these protests. This is an old hat in certain ways, and kind of rediscover the idea of the color revolution in the past 20, 30 years. But last week, we covered the interjection, indeed, of Putin's government into Iran, telling the Americans and the people behind them to sit down. This is not going to happen. One thing I'd like to bring up, and this is most appropriate, is that Russia has claimed that it has weapons that could inundate the east coast of America, nuclear weapons with water. And actually, if I were to go off of memory, it sounds fantastic, not in a good sense, but in an unbelievable sense of what they threatened. But the point is, even if that threat, that weapon capability to make basically a tidal wave that could wipe out the East Coast is exaggerated. The point is, Russia does have military capabilities that are, like any modern cutting edge nation state, impressive. And they do have the back of Iran. And that needs to be kept in mind in all of this discussion altogether, is the fact it's not just the individual countries that pop up on our radar, Iran or Iraq or whatever, but that there are people behind them. So I would just bring that attention as well.
Excellent, John. I do agree. Meanwhile, Larry Johnson, whom I regard as a very expert commentator on foreign affairs, right up there with Colonel McGregor, Scott Ritter, and Colonel Wilkerson, reports Trump's confabulations are more serious than just a response to a bruised ego. Donald Trump is not the only president of the United States described as a narcissist and confabulator, but if Trump were in an Olympic-style competition with Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden, he would be the gold medalist. Let's start with Trump's confabulation about his claim to have settled 8 wars. The 8 conflicts Trump claims to have stopped or resolved since returning to office in 2025 as part of his self-described war as a president of peace are as follows, based upon his public statements and social media posts. Israel and Hamas, Gaza conflict. Trump claims credit for brokering a ceasefire in the 2-year war, though Israel's continued to murder Palestinians, albeit at a reduced rate, compared to the killing done prior to the ceasefire, and the deal's durability is questioned. Israel and Iran. He asserts he ended hostilities between these nations, likely referring to a brief 2025 flare-up or broader tensions, but no full-scale war was ongoing, and the situation remains volatile. Moreover, Trump ordered the bombing of Iran, not exactly the action one associates with peace. Pakistan and India. Trump has boasted about preventing a nuclear escalation between these rivals, claiming millions of lives were saved. This appears to reference averted border skirmishes rather than an active war. India has explicitly disputed Trump's claim of brokering a ceasefire at their border conflict over Kashmir in May of 2025. Indian officials, including Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri and External Affairs Minister S. Jakhara, stated that the agreement was reached directly between India and Pakistani militaries without U.S. mediation or third-party involvement. John, could you assist?
Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, they state, Trump says he resolved this conflict, but Rwanda and the DRC have seen their conflict continue despite a U.S. brokered ceasefire signed in June of 25. The DRC has accused Rwanda of violating the deal, and rebel groups like M23 have advanced farther, with fighting persisting even during negotiations. This disputes Trump's claims of quote-unquote a glorious triumph, as the peace has not held. Then there's Thailand and Cambodia. Trump claims to have halted border clashes here, even jokingly calling a supposed flare-up an extra-quarter war. Though this was more of a diplomatic dispute than a full war. Neither Thailand nor Cambodia has confirmed Trump's claims of multiple ceasefires. even in 2025. And border clashes have resumed shortly after announcements like October 25's Kuala Lumpur Peace Accord. Officials from both countries have not acknowledged U.S. brokering as the key factor, and renewed airstrikes and fighting directly contradicts the quote-unquote ended status. Then there's Armenia and Azerbaijan. Trump takes credit for ending hostilities, referring to a ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh region. But tensions and sporadic incidents continue. Armenia and Azerbaijan have not issued denials or contradictions regarding Trump's mediation. Pashinyan and Aliyev participated in the White House ceremony, presumably from those countries mentioned, and subsequent statements from both sides. Azerbaijan's foreign ministry and Armenia's officials referenced the U.S.-backed framework and brokered framework positively, while noting ongoing work towards full ratification and implementation. However, the deal is not fully ratified or implemented. It remains a framework or a joint declaration requiring parliamentary approval and constitutional changes. And they give a specific here in the referendum. Then there's Egypt and Ethiopia. Trump asserts he prevented a war over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Nile, but this was a water-sharing dispute resolved through mediation. Egypt and Ethiopia have no formal peace deal, despite Trump's claims of preventing a war over this Grand Renaissance Dam. The dispute remains a diplomatic tension over water rights with no armed conflict to quote-unquote end, and ongoing mediation without resolution, disputing Trump's role in a conclusive settlement. Then there's Serbia and Kosovo. Trump claims to have stopped a potential war, but no active fighting had occurred since 1999. This likely refers to economic normalization agreements he claims to have facilitated, though underlying issues persist. While Trump remains desperate to be christened the so-called peace president, he has ordered bombings in Syria and Nigeria. He's ordered attacks on boats in the Caribbean allegedly carrying drugs, ordered the kidnapping of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, and is stridently insisting on forcible takeover of Greenland, although that, I think, has been somewhat moderated most recently. The forcible part. The issue of Greenland has prompted some truly bizarre commentary from Donald Trump following a text message from Norway's Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Store, and Finland's president over the weekend. Here is the text message from Mr. Store to Mr. Trump as of the 18th of January. Quote, "Dear Mr. President, dear Donald, on the contact across the Atlantic, on Greenland, Gaza, Ukraine, and your tariff announcement yesterday. You know our position on these issues, but we believe we all should work to take this down and de-escalate. So much is happening around us where we need to stand together. We are proposing a call with you later today, with both of us separately. With both of us or separately. Give us a hint of what you prefer. Best, Alex and Jonas."
I would add that the discussion doesn't even talk about, ongoing supply of weapons to Israel to slaughter the Palestinians, or the continuing support for the war, between Ukraine and Russia. I mean, his claim to be a peace candidate or peace president are frankly absurd and unwarranted. And of course, it's taking a toll on world opinion. Look at this, John. Only 16% of EU citizens consider the U.S. an ally. That's an incredible number. Only 16% of EU citizens now consider the U.S. an ally. Even in the U.K., it's down to a meager 25%. In fact, perception of U.S. as an ally are in complete collapse globally, India being the only odd exception. Generally speaking, thinking about the U.S., which of the following best reflects your view on what they are to your country? Share of respondents saying the U.S. as an ally that shares our interests and values in percentage. India, oddly, 40%, but South Korea, Brazil, no, India, oddly, 49%. South Korea, 40%, but Brazil, 26%, UK, 25%, South Africa, 19%, Ukraine, 18%, EU, 16%, Turkey, 11%, China, 10%, Switzerland, 8%, Russia, 2%. John, your thoughts?
Well, kind of out of left field here, but it merges with some of my reading earlier today, and maybe our observations. Perhaps yourself, perhaps the audience. American culture. American culture, just stepping outside of politics. One of the things I've been noticing personally, and people have commented lately on this, is that we're pumping out movies, we're pumping out video games like crazy from this country, but many of us, perhaps, certainly myself, think that the quality of the storytelling is nothing like what it was. I will go so far as to say that we've been in America basically recycling maybe the same 5 or 10 storylines again and again and again. And it's interesting that in the past couple of years, it's come out that there's literally a manual in Hollywood that all the young kids out of the colleges are reading. So the fact that everything seems cookie cutter is because they're all reading the same movie manual. But to this story, that it's interesting to me that if that observation about American film and what's called soft power, in fact, is correct, that it's waning and it's less impressive than it once was, it's an interesting correlation to this. Obviously, there's a there's a dynamic with Ukraine and how that plays a role in the European cooling to America, in this administration at least. But also, I would just bring that on the table too, this cultural aspect that American power is not just receding in terms of moral claims or in terms of hard power militarily, but also in this soft power in terms of, frankly, propaganda.
Kevin Barrett asks, will Zio USA decapitate the Zio USA? Insiders have strong reason to seashell Trump with extreme prejudice. We're hearing a lot about decapitation strike these days. Trump and Stein decapitated Venezuela by kidnapping its president, Nicolas Maduro. Ukraine and NATO tried to decapitate Russia through its failed drone strike on Putin. Some media are floating the notion of decapitating Iran by killing its supreme leader. And of course, Israel has recently decapitated Hezbollah and Hamas. Will Trump decapitate Denmark by ordering a drone strike on its prime minister, Mette Frederiksen? Will he decapitate Norway by ordering the assassination of Jonas Gahr Store, who Trump holds responsible for failing to give him a Nobel Peace Prize? Will he decapitate Canada by killing Mark Carney, who recently gave a speech at Davos that Trump didn't like? In rare instances, decapitation strikes can work. That can happen when the new leadership that replaces the murdered former leader pursues a diametrically opposed policy. For example, Lyndon Johnson, an Israeli asset, presided over Israel development of nuclear weapons in 1967 for a territorial expansion. Had Israel not decapitated the U.S. by killing John F. Kennedy, none of that would have happened. Where I'm obligated to add, yes, Israel participated in the assassination. But by my analysis, there were 8 sponsors, each of whom had their own shooter in Dealey Plaza on 22 November 1963. Israel one among them. Decapitating a dangerous Western wing can also work, especially if you blame the killing on your enemies. That's what Israel did when it framed an innocent, hypnotized Palestinian patsy for the murder of RFK in 1968. But even more often than not, decapitation doesn't work. For a long list of examples, read Ronan Bergman's book, Rise and Kill First, which documents Israel's outrageous history of political assassination, including decapitations and decapitation attempts. To the extent that Bergman's Assassinations Chronicle has a thesis, is that the leaders who replace those murdered by Israel are generally even more dedicated and talented than their martyred predecessors. And that shouldn't surprise us. People get angry when you kill their leaders. That's especially the case in cultures featuring a cult of martyrdom. In those cultures, good people struck down by bad people are the ultimate heroes. And anyone who dies in the path of God is lionized and assured a glorious and ecstatic eternity. Kill one, and 1,000 line up behind the martyr and steel themselves for battle. That is what has happened in Iran in the wake of the murder of General Soleimani in January 2020. Israel's suspected murder of President Ibrahim Raisi in May of 2024, its murder of top IRGC commander Hossein Salami, among other leaders and scientists in June of 2025, and the recent wave of killing of police officers and innocent bystanders alike by ISIS-like Captagon, crazed Zio-American Pavlovian death squads earlier this month. In all those cases, countless millions of Iranians came out in the street to honor their martyrs and sent a message: kill a leader, 1,000 others join the battle. By plotting to kill Putin and the supreme leader of Iran, the Zionists occupied USA is playing with fire. Russia really believes, what's the use of a world without Russia? And would indeed, if pushed far enough, use those radioactive tidal wave weapons that would render the U.S. eastern and western seaboards permanently uninhabitable. Permanently uninhabitable. Likewise, Iranians don't fear death. No, there's no better use of life than to die for a good cause, and could plausibly reach the point that inflicting massive pain on their Israeli and American enemies, even at the cost of their cities and millions of lives, would be the right thing, and indeed, only thing left to do. Yes, John. Yeah.
Just to interject, earlier in this broadcast, I had mentioned the alleged tidal wave weapons. That's exactly what I'm talking about, where that link is, and people can see the citation earlier if they just rewind the video. That's exactly what I was referring to. Please go on, Dr. Fetzer.
Yes, John. Yes, exactly. Remember, every Iranian or Palestinian or Lebanese or Yemeni or Iraqi or Afghan, etc., who dies resisting Negro is a hero and a martyr. The Quran tells us, fitna in this case, meaning the chaotic meaninglessness of life under injustice, is worse than killing. Given a choice between living under extreme injustice and killing at least some perpetrators, even at great cost, a Muslim will kill the perpetrators of injustice. Nominal Muslims who won't are not following their religion nor worthy of their humanity. The same, of course, is true for all human beings, but non-Muslims don't have the advantage of a clear message that explains such things in unmistakable terms. Let me return here, by the way, John, for your thoughts before we proceed to our final slide.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you for this invitation, Dr. Fetzer. So here, there's a mention of the Quran for the Muslims, and the Christians, they have the Bible. I mentioned Hollywood a few minutes ago. These products, if you forgive the expression, these products influence and inform the mind. Something that's very interesting that struck me as Dr. Fetzer was reading this is decapitation. And we don't get so much into the occult stuff in this series here, but it's worth keeping a finger on, because this is reality. Everything we're talking about with politics here, this concerns reality, what's happening on the earth. And there is a dark aspect to things, I suggest. And decapitation is an interesting thing. The order that we live in goes back, at least superficially, 500 years, the liberal order, the beginning of capital L liberalism. I don't mean this in the modern dialectic, the capital L Enlightenment. Let no one forget, and this is the point I would like to make, and this is what was striking me, let no one forget this began not even with the French Revolution and the decapitations with the guillotine. It began with the decapitation of King Charles. People don't know that. Even if we speak English, people don't know about the English Civil War. This was the real shot across the bow of the modern world. And this order and that execution of King Charles I by decapitation very soon was followed by the Treaty of Westphalia and this liberal, capital L, nation state order. So decapitation is not for nothing. And the fact, just like we see 33 hours that the killer, so-called, of Charlie Kirk was on the run, and 33 this and 33, it's everywhere once you see it. 33 COVID deaths here, there, and everywhere. Likewise, keep an eye out for 33 with the symbolism, because the Quran influences the Muslims, the Christians with the Bible, the Hollywood with people, whatever. This sort of occult stuff, however you phrase it, it also influences people. And so anyway, that's what struck me, is this repetitive use of the word decapitation, even in sober, run-of-the-mill statecraft.
Excellent, John. Excellent. Finally, Mega tends to focus exclusively on one issue and ignore the rest. Thus, Minnesota deporting the illegals, but there's so many other issues. The internal passport system, technocratic surveillance state, Plantier database, biometric tracking, algorithmic pre-time system, militarizing police normalized, ICE expanding budget power, unaccountable informant apparatus, domestic extremist labeling, DHS big tech fusion centers, permanent emergency powers. John, not only are those all taking place, but of course, on the broader scheme, we have everything else we've been addressing here today. And it is a concern that this administration is so eager to distract from the Epstein files, which apparently have as devastating political content as those radioactive tidal waves would have unleashed upon the United States in a political context. They're doing everything they can to evade, suppress, and divert, which appears to me to be highly explanatory of the situation we're in today. Your thoughts?
That's a great closing schematic there with the MAGA fellow, and yeah, that's it. And it's amazing once again to the closing kind of theme of some of my rejoinders here, the power of the media, and we can see that. I see it myself too. Watch this, illegals, and then we focus like the laser beam fellow there, but also with the deluge of events. I don't know if I brought this up in this series before, but it's, I think, a worthy observation, is there are things that have happened even in the time we've been doing this series and a little bit before, things of gravity, which in an earlier generation would have stuck in people's minds. The fall of Saigon, for a man of your age and your generation, that I remember people talked about that growing up. The fall of Kabul a couple of years ago, good or bad is another discussion, but it should have stuck in younger people's minds. And I tell you that people have forgotten this. And JFK, I know that's your bailiwick, certainly, of research, Dr. Fetzer. JFK was very much, as I understand it, and it was many times recounted to me, something that stuck in people's minds, or 9/11 stuck in people's minds. We could talk about the nitty-gritty, of course, but the events people remember. And yet the killing of Charlie Kirk, and again, a lot of hanky-panky, but the vast majority of people, if they even paid attention to something which ought to have caught their attention, have forgotten about it. And there are many things. So my final observation to this schematic at the end is that's right on point, is that our attention is ragdolled, it's manipulated, but it's also perhaps almost exhausted at this point, so that even major events, or what should have been or were, there's similes in the past, major events, they wash over us, and we forget about it, and we're on to the next thing. So anyway, there's a lot to talk about that, but many fascinating stories this week, Dr. Fetzer. Thank you.
Well, John, it's a joy to have these exchanges with you as often as we do, because you have such a wonderful background and active intellect and have so much to contribute yourself. So let me just say, I'm just overjoyed for these opportunities for us to discuss current events and exchange ideas about them, for which I'm very grateful.
Excellent. And as am I towards yourself there, Dr. Fetzer. For the audience, thank you for your attention here. And briefly, and you can find these down below, do check out jameshfetzer.org, and you can get up to date with Dr. Fetzer's very prolific output in audiovisual and article content. And then there is, if you're especially in for reading, and everyone should be, moonrockbooks.com. So you can find out everything that you need to know about current events and what's going on behind the scenes there. So with all of that being said, this has been our January 24th, 2026 edition of News with the Fetz. It's not a board for peace. To the audience, thank you. Dr. Fetzer, thank you.